Okay, so our last kind of lecture topic that's not really related to structure or reactions, but just general knowledge. It's kind of what I look at as the previous videos with these polymers, general knowledge kind of stuff, is this whole topic of um, sweeteners. And these are artificial sweeteners. So we've talked about the issue with too much sugar. We said that too much glucose your body begins to store and your body begins to chain it up and it saves it for a rainy day. And then when that happens, typically our hips and our butt and our thighs get a little bigger, maybe our belly too, right? Depending on where you like to store your extra fat. So there's been a trend, of course, very early on that we like sweet things, but at the same time we don't like fat. So is there a way that we could maybe make something sweet but not really have our body metabolize it like glucose? And for years and years and years, all the way back to really the early 1800s or the late 1800s, we start to see a trend in these artificial sweeteners. What else can we use in the food products that make things taste sweet and make things taste good so that you will go out and spend your hard-earned money on it and make these companies rich? Okay, so what has happened over the past really 100 years, 150 years now, is that we have tested and test drove a couple of different artificial sweeteners. So, if you take a look in 1884, well, we take a look at our first artificial sweetener, and the problem with that one is that it was kind of banned as toxic, and it wasn't very good for you. So that artificial sweetener gets taken off the shelves, and then in the 1950s, we finally get another artificial sweetener that we think that we have our hands on. However, this artificial sweetener was shown that it caused cancer in mice. And that was a bad no-no, right? So this was an issue, and that product gets taken off the shelf. 1981, we finally get kind of our first mainstream artificial sweetener called aspartame. And the aspartame structure is right here. Notice this aspartame structure is not like any glucose structure at all. There's no rings. Well, there's a ring here, but it's a benzene ring. There's no glucose rings. There's no pyranose. There's no furanose. None of those exist. Notice also there's no polyhydroxys. There's no multiple OH groups that are on this structure. It's all basically a carbon with a aldehyde or ketone group, in this case, ketone. But is it really a ketone? Because if I take a look at this C double bond O, I see it attached to an N. And then I see a carbon, and then I see a carbon, and then I see a C double bond O attached to an OCH3 group here. Okay, well the story is that there's multiple kind of carbonyls here. This carbonyl, of course, would be an ester, C double bond O-O. And this carbonyl would be an amide, C double bond O-N. And then this carbonyl looks like there probably was a hydrogen here, so maybe a carboxylic acid. That hydrogen was ripped off though, and now it's basically kind of like a salt, something that dissolves pretty well. We see an NH3 group, which is an amino group here, so NH3 positive. And of course we see a benzene ring with a CH2. It has nothing similar, as far as structure goes, to any sugars that we have seen. And that's kind of the beauty of these artificial sweeteners. So very early on it was thought that these sugars tasted sweet because they were all structurally similar. Think about the aldose and ketose charts that you have just basically looked at for video after video after video. All of those are very common as far as they have some similarities between their structure. So very early on, scientists thought that there was a receptor on your tongue that basically looked at some of these structural properties of sugars to make them sweet. Because if they all taste sweet, then that means these have something in common that your tongue is picking up on. And then we get something like aspartame that comes in that has no structural similarities at all to the sugars that you eat, but it still tastes sweet. Actually 200 times sweeter than your typical sugar. So now we're kind of thrown for a loop. What really is making you register the sweet taste? Well, we can't really figure it out yet. We don't really know what structure, what enzyme, what is going on with your tongue that's making these things pick up sweetness, because so far none of these things have anything common as far as structure goes. So this is aspartame. After aspartame came out, we start to see other variations of this. Finally, 1988, we get a new artificial sweetener, and then finally in 1991, we get another artificial sweetener. That was, of course, sucralose, which is here. So sucralose looks very similar to sucrose, right? Which is why the name is very similar. The difference, though, is that the structures that these things make up, right? If you take a look at the sugar on the top and the sugar on the bottom, you're going to see a chlorine here, and you're going to see a chlorine there, and you're going to see a chlorine here. So those are slight modifications of the sugar sucrose. But this is aka Splenda. So very often, you go to the coffee shops or you make sweet tea and you use Splenda instead. Some of us cook with Splenda instead of sugar because it's not really a sugar that basically your body gets stored. 600 times as sweet as sugar. And many people have issues with these artificial sweeteners. I don't know how many people I run across that say I do not use artificial sweeteners because they cause cancer. Okay, here's the truth, folks. They do cause cancer. But they cause cancer at a very high level. Studies have shown that all of these sugars cause some type of cancer or problem as far as your health is concerned. And at a certain point, anything probably is going to cause a disruption in your body, like cancer. It's basically all in the amount that you intake. And right now, current studies are actually showing that if you are basically drinking less than 2 gallons of soda a day, you are perfectly safe. So you don't have to worry about these artificial sweeteners. All of the tests that have been done by FDA, all of the testing that has been done in laboratories are showing that at a normal level, on a normal intake, you are perfectly fine. If you look at the MSDS for water, it's going to say highly dangerous and death will result in high amounts. Okay? Water has a health issue on it. And we know if we drink too much or if we put our head in it, well, we're going to drown. Our bellies are going to burst. And if you are drinking less than 2 gallons of soda a day, then you're perfectly fine. Anyone that's drinking more than 2 gallons of soda has bigger issues to worry about than getting cancer from an artificial sweetener, period. So you don't need to be afraid of the artificial sweeteners. The thing that I do want to tell you, however, is that current studies are also showing that artificial sweeteners in diet sodas aren't really helping your diet. We often think that if we drink diet soda, we're eliminating calorie intake, and we are. With that particular drink, we are limiting the calorie intake. So we drink these diet sodas, and then we kind of eat our normal routine. The problem there is that this begins to send a signal to your brain, and the brain says, I'm not getting the sugar that I want. So I'm going to persuade you to eat more. And that's actually what's happening in people's diets. They are converting over to a diet soda thinking that this is better for them. And it is. It really is better for them because drinking kind of an artificial sweetener soda versus a sweetened soda that's got these calories and got this extra sugar on it, it is better. The problem though is that subconsciously your brain is telling you, um, you've cut out this sugar, so I need you to eat a little bit more for me, please, so I can pick up the sugar that you have left out and that you are neglecting to give me. And the common trend is that people that are drinking diet sodas are really eating more food. And when you eat more food, you eat more calorie. And sometimes that extra calorie is outdoing what you would have gotten from your sweetened sodas. So that's something that you want to be careful on. Just make sure that your brain is not tricking you to eat more when you do these diet sodas for your breakfast or lunch or dinner or all of the above. And just take my advice. Don't drink more than 2 gallons of diet soda a day and you'll be okay. You don't have to worry about these cancer issues or health issues with any of these sweeteners. So they are tested, they are tried and true. As long as you don't ingest them in large amounts, you're okay. But you know, that goes for everything. As long as you don't ingest them in large amounts, you should be perfectly fine.